If you're looking to get started as a real estate investor, getting your first deal is critical because that is not only going to get money in your pocket, but also is going to prove to you, it's going to give you confidence that you can do this, that this business is real. So that's what I want to do in this video. I want to walk you through step by step the entire process. And at the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what you need to work on, what needs to get done in order for you to successfully complete a wholesale real estate deal. Because wholesaling real estate is different than fix and flip real estate. It's the easiest way to get started. It's the lowest risk possible way to get started. And I'm gonna walk you through this step by step on my laptop here so that we can make sure that I don't miss anything. So again, what I want you to do is subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, give me a like because that sends a signal to YouTube to say, hey, you know what? These people like this video. Also, as you're watching the video, make sure to make any comments on the video on materials and or anything else that you would like me to cover in future videos. Very, very important. So let's go ahead and go right now. So how do you get your first wholesale deal? Well, let's talk about, first of all, wholesaling. And I want to make sure that everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about. You are finding below market real estate deals when you're wholesaling. And we call those motivated sellers. However, keep in mind is this, no matter how great of a real estate investor you are, you really can't get anywhere unless you're able to find below market deals. So wholesaling really teaches you the art, the science of finding below market real estate deals in anywhere in the country. And so then now we're negotiating with that property owner and placing that property on a contract. We're finding an investor buyer that is looking for a similar type of property. And that investor buyer can be a landlord, can be a fix and flip investor, somebody who's looking to buy the property, fix it up, just like you see in those TV shows. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and sell your contract to that buyer, to that landlord, to that fix and flip investor. And you're going to do that via an instrument called an assignment of contract. And what is going to happen is that landlord or that fix and flip investor, they're going to pay you a fee that can range anywhere from a few $1,000s to $10,000 or more. I've made as much as $94,000 on a single deal. And really, wholesaling is the easiest and the fastest way to get started in real estate investing as a beginner. So now let's go ahead, since we covered that, let's go ahead and cover the goal of this video. The goal of this video is to give you a big picture overview of all the different components. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do videos on each of these components in greater detail on the channel. So one of the things that I would like you to do is make a comment on anything that you think that you feel that, yeah, I really want you to cover this, Chico, because this will really help me out. So I want to be able to do as much as I can for you. And just in case you're wondering, the tool that I'm using for creation of this video, it's what I use for all of my note-taking and fleshing things out, and that is an app called Dynalist.io. So if you just Google that, I'll include the link in the description. That is what I'm using in order to flesh these videos out. So now let's go ahead and talk about mindset, because a mindset is a really, really important and critical item when it comes to, your real estate wholesaling business. And there's three things that I want to make sure that you understand. Number one is that, perfection is the enemy of progress. It is very easy in this business to go down the rabbit hole of trying to get trying to get so much information, trying to fill in all the gaps and the details and all the peculiarities of getting this business off the ground. And it can be daunting. And so you have to keep in mind is that you are not going to be able to get everything right. There are certain things that you want to make sure that you do get right, and I'll make sure to point those out. Other things, yes, it'd be great if you got them right, but if you didn't, that's okay, because they're not going to be critical items that are going to cost you money or are going to get you into any sort of trouble or anything like that. The second concept I want to talk about is the concept of just-in-time learning versus just-in-case learning. So we're going to be walking through this process in a step-by-step fashion, in a very chronological way. And so you have to keep in mind is that you're not going to worry about something until it's right just at the time that you need to worry about it. So for example, I'm going to talk to you in this video about ways to find cash buyers and investors that are going to take over your deal, and you're going to be able to collect your assignment fee. However, if you have not done anything to start finding properties that are below market, there's no reason to even consider any training or any materials on cash buyers because it's unnecessary. You haven't gotten to that point yet. So keep in mind is the just-in-time learning is better than just-in-case learning. And the last but not least, motion beats meditation. At the end of the day, you have to keep on moving forward. You cannot steer a parked car. And the same way you cannot steer a parked car, you cannot make any progress in your business if you're just stuck in the mud thinking through things and or analyzing things and or studying and restudying and gathering a bunch of information. You've got to take some information and you've got to move forward and then continue to move forward in order to be able to have a chance at making this business work. Now, let's go ahead and go with step number one. And step number one is going to be, whoops, I messed up here. I didn't realize that these were here unchecked. All right, so step number one is launching what I consider to be the primary and secondary seller marketing. Now, we have to go out and find these properties that are below market where the sellers, and a question that you may ask is, hey, why would a seller even sell us their property at a discount? Well, the reason for that are many things. You know, number one, it could be that the seller has a property that needs a ton of repairs or fixing up, and they just don't have the money to be able to spend on the repairs and hire a contractor and put it on the market to get full retail value. Maybe they just don't want to. I recently sold a car that I owned a free and clear, and I could have taken that car and gone to Craigslist, posted it on there and tried to get top dollar for it. But I went to the dealer. I went to the dealer because I didn't want to bother with, sprucing up the car and putting in new tires and all that other stuff. And I know that the dealer didn't pay me as much as I could have gotten if I went out into the open market, but I didn't want to deal with any of that. So I just went ahead and I sold it to the dealer. It's the same thing here. You're looking for a property owner that is just not willing through either desire or maybe capability to sell their property via conventional methods. And so you're going to come in and be able to offer them a solution to their problem. Now, in order to find these people, we have to use marketing. And there's two different types of marketing that we can use. And so what I want you to do is I'm going to talk to you about the different types of marketing and which ones I recommend. And I'm going to talk to you about the categories of those marketing methods. So, however, let's focus on one thing. You cannot go out and try and implement all of these marketing methods simultaneously. It's just not going to work. You're not going to do any of them well. And so the intent here is to pick one primary marketing method that you're going to use. That's the main thing that you're going to use in order to find yourself some motivated sellers. And then you're going to have a secondary one. But that secondary one is really one that is a smaller effort than the primary one. So what do I mean by that? So the primary market is going to take 80% of your time, 80% of your budget, 80% of your efforts. And then the secondary market is one that is going to be, it's going to supplement what you're already doing. Because you don't want to have just one thing, but you don't want to spread yourself out and try and implement, 10 different marketing methods because, again, you're just not going to do any of them well. Now, there are two types of marketing. There's inbound marketing and then there's outbound marketing. So let's cover each one. Actually, I'm going to reverse them because I'm going to cover this one first. Outbound marketing. Outbound marketing is where you are taking actions in order to find these individuals that are looking to sell their property at a discount. Now, these people have not reached out to you. They have not raised their hands and communicated with you in any way whatsoever. And so you're going to have to go out and reach out to them. Now, there's a variety of different ways to do that. However, I'm going to list the most common here, which is number one is cold calling. Number two is mass texting. And then the last one is going to be MLS agents. So when it comes to cold calling, and I forgot to write a couple of things down, so we're going to just write them down as we speak here. Outbound marketing, when it comes to cold calling, again, with all of these here, let's come here and let's put here the sources. So what are we talking about here? A source. We have to go out and we're going to have to find list of property owners, right? And then these property owners are owners that are predisposed to potentially sell their property at a discount. So we're not going to say, for example, I live in a neighborhood where the houses are relatively higher priced than the majority of the county. So let's say if somebody has a property that they own and that property is worth $1 million, right? Then the likelihood is that they have the capability, they have the resources, and they have whatever they need in order to be able to sell that property at a discount, right? So this here would not be a good person to go after, right? So $1 million plus properties equals no, right? What we want is we want properties that have owners that have a particular situation around that they're dealing with that gives you an opportunity to buy the property at a discount. So it could be that we're dealing with a tired landlord, right? So a tired landlord is one. We could be dealing with somebody who is delinquent. We'll call it tax delinquent properties, a property that is delinquent on their property taxes. Vacant properties, right? A property that has been sitting vacant and the person isn't living there. The owner doesn't know what to do with it. So that's somebody that you could help, right? So vacant properties. It could be code violations, right? So it could be list of properties that are have violations because the owner has let them go. Maybe the tenant moved out and never kind of fixed anything, and then now the grass is overgrown and kind of all particular type of situations. Right? So we'll call it code violations. So these are the different sources of lists. Now we can go to a variety of different places to go out and get these lists. Now, one of the places that you can go to, and I'll write it down here, you can go to Flipanywhere data. And that's one of my sources where you can go in and you can find these individuals. Don't do this now. I have additional videos on the channel about this. But just keep in mind is that we're looking for somebody with motivation. And now we're going to go out and we're going to find these individuals that have motivation. And we're going to source them from lists that we can go out and we can get. Now, once we get the list of these lists on our hands right here, now we have an option of doing a couple things with these lists, right? Now, preliminary before, so we have cold calling and we have texting. Cold calling is where now we're going to go out and get the phone number for these people. And the way we get the phone numbers for these people is through a process called skip tracing. And skip tracing is we go out and we use a service in order to get the phone numbers, the cell phone numbers and the landlines of these individuals. And they're going to come back with like 3 to 5 to 7 phone numbers for each person. And then we're going to go ahead and call them. And we're going to go ahead and place an outbound call. And the nature of the call, and again, I could do a video on this specifically, the nature of the call is just simply asking them if they might have an interest in selling their property. And, initially, it's one of the tougher conversations because they don't know who you are. They don't know if you're a scammer and you have to come across a particular way. And again, I'll do this in another video because I'm trying to keep this video more a big picture overview. But with cold calling, that's one option. Another option is we can then go ahead and do the same thing with this. We can go ahead and do skip tracing on these leads, and we can send them a text message. Now, you can send them a text message with your phone, or with any of these different methods. If you are acquiring, let's say you get a list of 50 people, then that's very easy for you just to pick up your cell phone, and call them and text them. If you have a list of, say, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people, then you're going to have to use a software system in order to be able to sit there and be able to call that many people and be able to do it in an efficient manner. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that right here in this video, maybe for future videos, but keep in mind is I'm trying to keep a big picture so you can lay out all your different options and then make a determination what you want to do. So we're talking about text messaging these individuals. Now you could take the same list. Let's say that you had a tax delinquent list. You can take that tax delinquent list here, and you can go ahead and you can cold call it, and you can send them a text message as well, and you can try a variety of different ways to try to get a hold of that person. Now, another way to get deals is through real estate agents, and by contacting real estate agents, by looking at properties that are listed on the MLS and reaching out to them. I used to do this quite a bit. That's how I got started. I don't recommend that you do this when you're starting out in the business. And again, the reasons why I don't recommend you doing this in the business is because number one is of deposits. When you're dealing with properties that are listed with agents, you're going to need to put up pretty much a significant amount of money for a deposit with a real estate agent. So it's hard to get away from that. The contracts and the paperwork are different. The contract and the paperwork, I'm going to put contract and paperwork more difficult, right? So you have to contend with that. Also, keep in mind is this: in the beginning, you're not going to really know what you're doing. So when you're dealing with a private owner, and you're putting a property on a contract, there's a little bit more flexibility with regards to terms and how you structure that deal, and not with agents. And if you put a contract on a property with an agent, and then you end up bailing and canceling that agreement at the last minute for whatever reason, then now you've ruined that relationship with an agent that could potentially have been an agent that could have brought you deals. So maybe it would have been better for you to wait until you have done your first 2 to 3 deals and you kind of know what you're doing before you're dealing with real estate agents. So my recommendation is not to do that. Now these are the options then for outbound marketing, and I put agents as outbound marketing because typically you have to reach out to them, you have to build rapport, etc. But these are outbound methodologies. Now let's talk about inbound. What I should have done is just put these here, put in them. Let me see here what I got here. No, sorry about that. So that is outbound. So let's talk about inbound. Inbound is where you're doing marketing in order to get that person to raise their hand and then reach out to you. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. You can do direct mail, and again, just trying to give you the core ones, the basic ones that everybody can start with. So direct mail. Direct mail is where you are again taking and getting a list, and I realize that now as I'm doing this, and I think of stuff as I'm talking to you. The lists are going to be the same as the other one where we're talking about doing outbound, right? So we're talking about a tax delinquent list, a vacant property list, code violation list. We tired landlord. So these are the variety of different lists. Now the difference here is that instead of you going out and finding the phone numbers for these people and then going out and calling them and getting them on the phone, then your approach is going to be different. Typically with direct mail, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and you send a postcard. And I do have in my channel, you can look, type in the word postcard into the search, and you can see one of my postcards and what I recommend. So you can send out a postcard to those individuals, and the postcard will then ask them to call you and leave a message and raise their hand and say, yes, I am interested in selling my property. So that's one option there. And again, if you want to get the data for these, you can go to flipanywheredata.com. And then for postcards, a good resource is a website called click2mail.com. So let me do here, HTTPS. click2mail.com, where you can create postcards and you can mail them, etc. And this is what the website looks like here, click2mail.com. Not going to get into that right now. Now, let's go back to outbound. So direct mail is one. You could then send out letters and postcards. I recommend stick with postcards. Let's talk about PPC. Pay-per-click. PPC is pay-per-click. And this is where you go into Google and you will type in, let's see, if we go to Google and you type in sell my house fast, right? These entries that show up here, these are ads, right? Sell my house fast. I'm not going to click on them because if you click on them, then they're going to be charged for that. So I'm not going to do that. And they have phone numbers here for tracking. So every time somebody clicks on this, that means they're interested, and they'll go to the website, they'll submit their information, and now that individual who has the ad has a chance and opportunity to talk to them. The challenge with PPC is that it is fairly complicated, and you need a fairly large budget for that. So I'm going to put in here complicated. I don't recommend that as a beginner. I recommend if you're going to consider PPC, I generally tend to recommend that you, unless you're really tech savvy, to just have somebody do that for you. But in the beginning, if you're trying to get your first deal done, then it's not one that I recommend. Now, another one here that I don't have actually that I just thought of is SEO. Now, SEO, if we go back to the Google search here, I put in sell my house and I can type in sell my house Miami. And so here are the ads. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 different ads that show up. Now, the ones that don't say ad here, these are people that are optimizing their website, which for SEO. So they're going to be here, and basically somebody's going to click on here and submit their information. I don't know who these people are. in order for them to be submit your information if you're a seller. SEO, the thing with SEO is really slow, right, and requires some tech savviness, right, and just it's not one that I recommend starting off the bat. It's great to maybe put that into place once you get things going, but in the beginning, I don't recommend that. My favorite strategy right now, and going back to direct mail, with direct mail, I was a pioneer and continue to be a pioneer with direct mail. I mailed out millions and millions and millions of postcards. I have students and clients that have mailed out millions of postcards. I was a pioneer with direct mail when it comes to automated 24-hour recorded messages. And I know that you might say that may not mean anything to you in terms of what a 24-hour recorded message, but just know that I know what I'm doing when it comes to direct mail. Now, Facebook ads right now is my primary and my favorite method of getting leads. And Facebook, you can go to this link, chrischico.com/training, and then you can see a training that I have and exactly how to do that. I'll also put a link in the description for a training that I have here on my YouTube channel. But Facebook is where we're going to go out, and we're going to go out and find motivated sellers using Facebook paid advertising. We're going to run ads, and we're going to get people to raise their hand on Facebook and say, hey, I'm interested in selling my house. And, right now, the majority of real estate investors are out doing some of the other strategies that I mentioned, some of the outbound strategies like cold calling and SMS and going out with agents. However, when it comes to marketing, number one is I prefer always inbound marketing. I prefer where I'm not chasing people down, where I am going to go out and find a motivated seller because they're going to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in speaking with you, Chico, and I'd like to get an offer on my property. Also, too, keep in mind is that if you're dealing with some of these other strategies, such as the cold calling, it is very time intensive. You got to be on the phone calling. So you have to be okay with doing that. Are you okay with, making that many calls, spending hours on the phone each and every single day? If you're working full time, you may not have the capability of doing that because you don't have enough time in the day to do that sort of marketing, cold calling. Versus if you're approaching it with an inbound strategy such as direct mail and such as Facebook ads, then what the great thing is that you put that marketing into play. You could be at work doing your job, but those marketing methods are working. The direct mail is working. The Facebook ads are working, and they're bringing you leads. And so then now you can then be able to talk to those sellers and deal with those leads without having to deal with, my gosh, I got to get on the phone and talk to sellers like for 2 hours in cold call just to find a lead. The leads are coming to you. That's what I mean. So my recommendation is inbound. That's what I prefer. And again, I have a training here just on Facebook on how you can do that. You can go to chrischico.com/training, or I'll put a link in the description for a training that I have here that'll also pop up at the end of this video for Facebook advertising. Now, we've covered step one is we got to go out and we got to implement some sort of marketing method to find these deals. And we talked about, in this particular section, we talked about having a primary and having a secondary strategy, and then deciding if you're going to do inbound or outbound. Now, I'm going to do another video just on the breakup between this primary and the secondary. For the purposes of right now, I would just focus on selecting one primary method that you're going to use in order to find deals and leads that then you can turn into cash by getting your first wholesale deal under your belt. So let's talk about the next critical item when it comes to getting your first wholesale real estate deal, and that is speaking with sellers. And speaking with sellers is one of the most critical parts of the business. And I'm going to give you some suggestions here, and I will go into, I do have other videos on the channel that are pertaining to this particular topic. But the most important thing that you need to understand is this. All of these items come together in order to create success. It's not just about the marketing method you're using to find yourself a real estate deal. It's not just about, your ability to talk to sellers. It's about all these things all coming together to create success. Now, when it comes to speaking with sellers, one of the things that I recommend is to always follow a script. So in the beginning, you're going to be nervous. You're going to be unsure about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And so you need to try to eliminate as much as you can those variables, and you're going to do that by having a script that you're following with each and every single call. Now, granted, every call might be different, but you have a path. You have a way that you're going to attack each and every single call that you're on, in order to make sure that you have a chance of making your conversations with the seller fruitful, and that you're going to have a possibility of finding a deal, of negotiating a good price, and or also not screwing up a call that potentially could be a lot of money for you, but maybe you're going to mishandle that call, and so therefore now you're going to have an issue with that lead and not taking advantage of it. So following a script is critical. And then we also have to think about the modalities of conversation nowadays. And by that I mean that, in the past it used to be only phone, but now people are used to communicating in a variety of different ways. They're used to communicating via text. They're used to communicating via email and phone. I would argue that text messaging right now is a primary mode of communication versus email, or say versus the phone. Actually, the majority of the time, like for example with me and my wife, we're communicating most of the time through text messaging and not through phone. We get on the phone when we're trying to hash out something, or maybe she calls me to tell me how wonderful I am as a husband. Don't tell her that, because she might be embarrassed about that. But you have to consider that, and so each of these different modalities requires a certain script that you're going to follow. So the text message script is initially, when you're speaking with that seller, is different than, say, the script when you are calling them on the phone. What I find is that in the order that we're going to do these here, and I'm going to do, say, now I'm talking to you about, not in terms of the modality of the conversation, it also depends on how they communicated with you initially. So if that person communicated with you by leaving a voicemail message, then chances are you're going to go ahead and give them a call back, and you're not going to text them. You could, if you're trying to get a hold of them, and then you initially go ahead and call them, but you're not able to get a hold of them. So in the beginning, that might be just you're going to call them, and if not, then you'll text message them. If they filled out a Facebook form, then chances are you're going to go ahead and text message them first, email them, in an effort to try to get a hold of them, or at least begin that conversation, and then you'll get on the phone with them eventually. Typically what I find is, like with Facebook, I will go ahead and we'll text message the leads. We'll kind of get that conversation going, get warmed up, and eventually when we get to the part of the conversation where we're going to be discussing price and trying to get into the nitty-gritty details of the property, then at that point, then we ask to see if we can spend a few minutes with them on the phone in order to hash those details out. Now, so that's the speaking with sellers. The other thing you have to really become a master of is becoming a master of pricing properties. Because again, if you are great with sellers and you have a great marketing method, and you're getting properties that you're getting owners that are raising their hands and saying, yes, I want to sell my property, you have to know how to evaluate these properties and be able to determine the value of the property, determine the initial offer. How to position your offer so that you can keep the seller in the game and still be able to achieve your price. But you need to be able to have at least a pretty good idea of what a property is worth in that area, what potentially that property you could sell your contract to. If you say, for example, if you have a property that they're going for in the area for $140,000, right? So let's say that this is the retail value of the property. So we'll mark this here retail. And you're through market analysis, you realize that investors, right, in this area are paying $75,000 for this property. Now, at this point, now you know that if you go ahead and you negotiate a price of, say, I'm going to put in here price with seller, right? So price with seller of $65,000. Then, price of seller of $65,000. Then, why is it that of $65,000? Then that means that you have a differential, right, between the 65 and the 75,000. That's a $10,000 spread. So you could potentially make a $10,000 assignment fee. You need to be able to analyze a property to be able to know what these numbers look like. And so you know what the parameters are in terms of what you can offer, what you can make, etc. So that is something that has to be one of the critical items that you must learn and understand. Now, does it take forever to do that? Is it something where you need to know how to repair a property or anything like that? No. Remember, I said just in time. So right now, let me see here. I'm going to just make a note here, offer example as an example here. So, we talked about just-in-time learning. So when we look at this here, we're going to get our seller marketing going initially, just so that we can go ahead and get things going. But very quickly, we need to transition into, we put out the marketing. Let's say I put out the marketing, I'm doing Facebook ads, and I know I'm going to get calls starting to come in, in the next day or two. So I'm now going to start working on, hey, let's flesh out the script that we're going to be working with. Let's make sure that we're on the ball with what we need to say to these sellers. Let's go ahead and make sure that we are good at determining what a property is worth. And then that way we can take advantage of the leads that are coming our way. The next thing and the final thing would be agreements. Once you get a property on the contract with a seller, then you need to go ahead and sign a purchase contract. I'm going to put here purchase contract. And the purchase contract with the seller typically has certain clauses and provisions to allow you to be able to have enough time to be able to sell the property to another investor. One of those is inspection period, right? Then we have the closing period, closing time, and then we also have the deposits. Now, a trick that you can use with deposits is that the deposit is due after the inspection period. So that way, if you find a buyer for the property, the buyer is the one that puts up the deposit, not you, which means that then now you have the ability to not put any money into the deal outside of what you just spent on marketing. So I'm going to go through these. On the channel, we're going to have different playlists that are going to go through each of these items individually. But again, these are just a big picture overview of making sure that you know and understand the different steps required in order for you to be able to get your first deal done. So now that we've covered step 1 and step 2, now let's go ahead and cover step number 3, finding the buyers, assignments and closings. So let's talk about finding the buyers first. So there's so many ways to go out and find buyers. And what I want to do is encourage you to really focus and hone in on, just a handful of them, because you can't implement, 10 or 15 different strategies to find a buyer. So you really got to focus in the beginning on what are the ones that are going to generate the most potential for you to find the right buyers for your properties. And then just focus on those. So one is going to be the Facebook Marketplace, where people buy and sell information. That is number one. Now, whenever you are posting any of this information, right? When posting properties, okay, no address, okay, you're going to speak with buyers first before giving out address. All right, and also I'm going to put here, speak like a human being. An example could be is you can put a post that says, investment properties available for sale, cash, blah, 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 as opposed to saying, hey, I have a contract on a property at 123 Main Street that I'm looking to sell. It's below market, and it's worth 140, but I'm selling it for 75. That's total all in with my contract price and the assignment fee. I'm looking for someone who's going to pay cash and or close with hard money. I have a couple pictures here, but I can give you the rest of the details when you reach out to me. Just be like a normal human being. I know that's sometimes hard for people, just using that as a joke, but I see posts all the time where I'm like, you're just not going to get anybody to reach out to you that way. Because also you have to keep in mind that people's filters are always on with regards to advertisements and scams and stuff like that. So just be like talk like a person. The next one actually is going to be I'm going to put here Facebook local groups for real estate investors, right? So you can search on Facebook. There's a lot of groups that are local to your area, and where they are going back and forth constantly in terms of properties, right? Or people go into those groups and post properties in them. So look for groups like that, and that is another method for you to go ahead and get distribution and get some eyeballs on your properties. Craigslist is spotty. Some markets it works really great. Some markets it doesn't work that great. So but again, when you're posting on Craigslist, look to see in your local area how people are posting, and especially with Craigslist, you could post something and then it gets flagged and then it disappears very quickly. So if you look through Craigslist and see what are some of the older posts, a day old, a couple days old that have stuck and that nobody has removed. Look for keywords such as handyman, hard money, cash, investor, so you can find those investor posts and look to see, hey, how are they writing their post? How are they coming across that they didn't get flagged? And so then now you can tailor your post that way as well. Cash buyers from public records. So you can use a service like Flipanywhere.data.com, and you can go out and get a list of the most recent cash buyers in a particular zip code, right? So let's say you have a property 123 Main Street, zip code 33333 as an example. So then you're going to go in and find the cash buyers that recently purchased a property in that area. Now, when you're doing that, just a quick tip is you're going to target corporations, right? You're going to target corporations, and what you're going to do is you're going to look up the corporation in the public records site for corporations, right? So for example, in our state, in Florida, there's a site called sunbiz.org where you can search corporations. So then you're going to go ahead and find a name. I'll put here as an example, example. You're going to then find the name of the individual that owns a corporation. And then what you're going to do is you're going to search for that corporation name in the public records. In Google, try to find a phone number. You can skip trace that individual that owns a corporation, and so you're going to try to find that person and then just try to reach out to them. In the past, I used to send out postcards, and you can't do that. You can send. I would recommend the property notification postcard that I have. You can check the search on my channel, and you can search for a postcard. I think the title is the most obnoxious postcard. So if you look up that postcard, then you can see that postcard can be used for both buyers and sellers. Now, if you need like something like, the postcard is good when you're trying to build up that cash buyer list and you got some time to do that. But if you got a deal right now and you've got a limited amount of time in order to get that property sold, then the best thing would be is to go out and really try to find the buyers and try to get on the phone with them in an effort to try to get the property sold. Agents from past sales, what you can do is you can go, for example, you can go on Zillow or Flipanywhere data, and you can search for transactions that have recently sold. And then you can look up you could tell when a property was sold as a handyman, or maybe if a property is completely rehabbed. Look at the agent, and many times the agent will have either sold the property to that investor, or if a property looks completely rehabbed and you can tell in the public records that, hey, that property recently had been sold, and then 3 or 4 months ago was sold at a really low price and now it's up on the market. Many times the agent is the one that's in contact with that investor, right? So what you can do is reach out to the agent and say, hey, look, I got a contract. I'm looking to wholesale a property, more than willing to pay a commission on it. And you can just pay the standard 3% and work that into the deal, and then ask them if they might be interested in having their buyer look at that deal. And so then now, if they're not interested in that deal, they could potentially have other buyers too as well, because typically an agent that deals with investors may have other investors, not just one investor. They may have multiple investors. So looking at real estate agents from past sales. And then the other one would be wholesalers. Now with wholesalers, what I would recommend with wholesalers is just that in the beginning, I like to have, a couple wholesalers in my back pocket, not 20, not 10, a couple wholesalers that are willing to work with you in a way that makes sense. Not one where they are wanting 50% of the deal, because 50% of the deal is way too much money, especially if you got marketing costs, etc. But if you can find a wholesaler that's willing to take $3,000 to $5,000. And again, that depends on the deal, right? So if you have a deal that you're only going to make like $5,000, then you might have to give up 50% of that deal. But if you have a deal that you're going to make $25K, you don't want to give up 50% of that deal to another wholesaler. You want to find somebody that's willing to be flexible and say, okay, well, I mean, I like to make 3 to 5K. So if you're making 25, you can get away with paying 3K, maybe at the most 5K, and that makes sense versus, splitting the deal with the other wholesaler. So that's my recommendation in terms of other wholesalers. Then in terms of showing the property, the next step would be to show the property. So let's say if we look at this from an order here, we launched the marketing, we're speaking with sellers, we analyze the properties, we put it on the contract, we go out and now we find a buyer, and now we got to show the property. So the couple scenarios is you got to show the property. You have an owner-occupied property, so you have to make arrangements for the owner to show the property, and or if you have a tenant or you have a vacant property. So what's the difference? How do you deal with each one? So I'm going to write a couple of these here down. So let's talk about owner-occupied. So we have owner-occupied, and we have tenants, and then we have vacant, right? So owner-occupied, if you're going to have a real estate investor visit the property, then typically I like to have a boots on the ground, okay, that is going to help you in a few things in that market. If you're not there, if you're there, then go and meet the property owner along with the buyer. Now you have to prep the buyer. So one of the things that's important is to let the buyer, you have to ask certain questions of the buyer. And again, I'm giving you big picture here, and I'm going to go into each of these in the channel. But typically what you're looking to do is have a conversation with the buyer that kind of looks like this. Hey, Mr. Buyer, so you're familiar with real estate assignments, you've bought properties before. I'm going to go ahead and schedule time to go ahead and meet with the owner. I'm going to meet you there, or if you have somebody boots on the ground, I'm going to have Sally meet you there. And I don't have an issue with you asking any questions you want about the property, about the condition. If you see a hole in the wall, ask what is that hole in the roof, on the wall. But obviously don't discuss the price with the seller because that's something that you'll discuss with me. Have it on the contract. And so if they know the game, if you're dealing with somebody who understands the game, who understands what we're doing, and has bought properties before from another wholesaler via signing the contract, then it really should not be an issue. Them going to the property. Now, would they go to the property by themselves? Only if I've worked with that buyer many times and they know the deal, but not the first time. So if it's owner occupied, boots on the ground, or you showing the property, and then discuss with the buyer the showings and what not to ask. Now, if there's tenants at the property, and typically if it's just a tenant, then there I might fudge and just make arrangements with the tenants and the investor to go out there. So I would say investor can go on their own, right? So the investor can go on their own. In that scenario, I would just tell the investor that it depends. Most of the time, it's better. Sometimes the owner says, hey, I don't want the tenant to know. But, that's kind of always a dicey situation. I would tell the owner, I said, look, we're going to let the tenant know, but we'll let him know that, look, we're not looking to change anything. We're looking to, make the property better, making the situation better there. So in the end, it's a win-win. So we present it as a win-win to the tenant there, and then we also want we would want the buyer to be able to have a conversation with the tenant. Hey, how's the property? Have any problems? Are you happy? Et cetera, et cetera. And that way the tenant can let the buyer know, hey, what's going on in there? Because if the buyer's going to close on it, he's going to want to know what issues there are. The other things that come into play is whether or not is a tenant current on their rent or not, right? So if they're current on their rent, that's a different scenario than if they're not current. If they're not current on the rent, then typically we just try to smooth things over with the tenant and say, look, we're coming in and we're going to buy it. You may owe rent to this, to the previous owner, but we're not going to hold you to it. We're going to start from scratch, fresh. And so we're just trying to put that in a good light for the tenant, because if the tenant situation is really, really bad, then the other investors they're either not going to want to buy the property, or they're going to want a more significant discount in order to accommodate for the various issues that they might have to deal with after the fact. If it's vacant, then typically we would make arrangements for the property to be shown. Typically, if it's vacant, it's either the owner, which again would go back to the same situation here. You need boots on the ground, or you have to either you show the property if it's vacant, right? Same as owner occupied. Sometimes the owner may not live there. They may not have a way to get in, and so we would tell the investor to use an investor key. What's an investor key? An investor key is like a screwdriver or crowbar, and then just prep them to make sure that they understand who the owner is and the name of the owner. So if somebody shows up and says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" It says, "Well, I got permission to take a look at the property," etc. Typically, that's if we have to use an investor key and that sort of thing. Typically, the property is going to be in such bad shape that it's going to be a difficult sell, or the investor coming into the property has bought these type of deals before that are in really, really horrible shape, and so for them taking a look at the inside is not that big of a deal, because they already know the situation and circumstances, because they bought properties like that before. And then finally, when you go there, my recommendation is, depending on the situation, if you're when you're going to go show the property, so in terms of photos, there's a couple ways to approach it. So with photos, do you get photos first before sending out a buyer? The answer is maybe, because if you're dealing with a buyer, here's the deal. If you're dealing with a property that has a tenant inside of the property, and the owner has owned it for 10, 15 years, and it's in a typical area in that particular market, then somebody coming in, an investor that knows what he's doing, they're going to know the type of repairs that are needed on the property. They're going to know that the kitchen is going to be pretty bad, the bathrooms need to be remodeled, and all that other jazz, right? So to look at that property and to make a decision on that, they may not need photos. However, if I'm going to go ahead and schedule a time for the investor to go out there and go to the property, then a couple of things may happen. Number one is I may send a photo person to go take a look at the property alongside the investor. So the investor goes, I get a photo guy to take a look at it. If the investor doesn't want the property, then at least have photos that I could use in my marketing to try to find another buyer. Because also at the same time, I can't show the property like 15 times. I gotta see what I can do to minimize the inconvenience, especially if a seller's showing the property. And so I'll try to mitigate that by having photos. Sometimes you can ask the owner for photos of the property. That's also something that can work nowadays. Owners have cell phones, so you can just ask them, "Hey, would you mind taking some photos of the property?" And then that way I could have my underwriters take a look at it, and that will eliminate maybe some unnecessary showings. We still have to go in there and do a final inspection, but it'll help you and help me, etc. The other thing is you can get a picture. There is a service called BPO Flow. Let me see, HTTPS bpoflow.com. Let me see if that's it. I don't know if that's going to be it. It may not be it. BPO Flow. This one, BPO Photo Flow. I've used them before many times. They got great coverage. You'll pay for the photos for real estate, and they can get you some pretty good photos. They do a fairly good job. I like them better than previously. I had to use wegolook.com, but they have been spotty in the past. And in essence, you're just looking to get the buyer in there, being able to get them to take a look at the property and then make a decision. The one thing I would say when showing the property to a buyer is that you want to be able to vet the buyer a little bit, especially if you have photos. Meaning that if I've got a property and I've listed it, for sale, my contract total $75K, and I got a guy that wants to take a look at it, I would say, hey, just I gave you some photos. Obviously, going to take a look at the property and the inside. I mean, if everything is as we described, you're not going to go there and find there's a wall's missing and it looks like a bomb went off in the place. It's a $75,000 feel. This seemed like a good price for you. And either say yes or no, because what you want to do is if they say, well, no, I wouldn't pay any more than $50K. well, I mean, if I bought the property at 55 and so I can't sell it for 50K, then right then and there I would say, well, it wouldn't make sense for you to take a look at this property because it's just not a situation that we can do anything with, right? So I'm going to save that showing. So you want to do the best you can in terms of vetting the buyers, just to make sure that, especially when you're dealing with showings, you can't show the property 15 times. I don't recommend doing open houses when showing the properties, because then at that point then you look more like a real estate agent than anything else, and you want to be mindful of the fact that you don't want to get into trouble with any of the licensing laws that would say, hey, you're not really, you don't really have an ownership interest that you're trying to sell. You're trying to act as an agent, but you're really not. So those are nuances that we have to contend with. Then once let's say the buyer goes out there, he then says, yes, I do want the deal. Let's do it. So then we fill out an assignment of contract. The assignment of contract has, the deposits, closing timelines, issues, tenants with the leases, and there's a variety of different things that we need to make sure that we have in the assignment of contract. For the purposes of this video, if I were to do that, that could be a whole nother 30-minute video on that. So I'll do another video on that on the channel. Let me know if that's something that you're interested. Post a comment on there. And in terms of deposits, I'll give you some quick tips here. The deposit should be larger than what you have on the contract. So if you have a contract where you have $500 deposit due after the inspection period with the owner, and the buyer now wants a deal, then typically, let's say that if I have, as an example, I have $500 deposit with the seller due at the end of the inspection period, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the buyer put up a, say, $3,500 deposit. So they're going to put up $3,500 deposit by the buyer. 500 of that, right, is toward the seller agreement, and then the 3,000 is toward the assignment. So in the case of default, then the seller would get the 5, I would get the 3. And that's very important, because now this number is relative to the deal. If I've got a deal where I'm going to be making $20,000 or $30,000, I don't want to. I'm going to ask for a bigger deposit with the buyer, because I don't want anything to go wrong with that deal. So I may ask for $5,000 non-refundable deposit. That means that when we write up the assignment, they are committing to the deal. Do not do an assignment of contract where the buyer says, hey, I need a couple more days just to do my inspections. No, when we sign and you put up the money, it is done. You're closing, or I'm going to keep your money. That's bottom line. Closing timelines is a closing date before the seller closing date. So if our closing date at the end of the month for the 31st, then I'm going to close with the buyer, 7 days before. Time permitting. If I'm in a time crunch, then I may not be able to do that. But I want the buyer to close sooner, because if my deal with the buyer falls through, then I still want to be able to have time within my contract to be able to then find another buyer for the property. So the closing timeline is before the seller. And then, there's other issues. If the owner's staying in the property beforehand, then you might have what's called a post-occupancy agreement. If the owner's staying in the property after the fact, then you might have a post-occupancy agreement. If you have leases and you have a tenant there, then typically an estoppel letter is required. And the estoppel letter is basically where it says, hey, how much is the rent? How much is the deposit? When is the rent due? When is the rent due? And if the is tenant current? And all those things would be on there. The tenant would sign. Would sign along with owner, and that's so that you make sure that everybody's the buyers coming in understanding, hey, I got a deposit, because if there's a deposit, then the seller has to give a credit at closing for that deposit. So that's something that needs to be handled as well. And if there's a lease, then there's a copy of the lease is required along with the contract. Now, one of the things that I just want to go back here, when we deal with a buyer here, when we're showing the property to the buyer, we don't tell the buyer how much we purchased the property for, right? So the buyer doesn't know; they just know the final price. And even through negotiations, they don't. Now, however, when finally now we do have the buyer signed, we've agreed on price, and now we're gonna send them the assignment of contract for them to buy the property and for them to take over the property. Then at that point, then we will send them the original contract with the seller, and in that way, they will know specifically. Hey, what are the other terms of the agreement? Because they're taking over that contract. So by them taking over that contract, then they're taking on all responsibility, and anything that was written in that contract as an obligation, right? Because now they're the buyer. They're actually replacing you as a buyer in that contract. And so they need to know, they need to be able to look at the contract and make sure that you didn't promise something to the seller that you shouldn't have promised, because that could be a problem. And again, I'm just trying to, there's so many different layers of each of these items. You're just trying to keep them, just big picture, so you understand what the whole flow of this is here specifically. And that is the steps on how to find your wholesale deal. One last ask is, if you watch this video up to this point, do you like the format of this presentation, me using this software tool called Dynalist? I use this to sort everything out, so it's easy for me. Some people say, I don't like to see it that way. I prefer just looking at your beautiful bald head, Chico, with glasses. I don't need to look at anything on the screen. Maybe you prefer that. Maybe you prefer a PowerPoint slide. I don't know. My question to you is, which one do you prefer? And let me know. And let me know anything I missed or that you would want me to cover on this. There's a couple videos that are going to show up here, somewhere up at the top here. Take a look at those and let me know what you think.